am going to, because our notes are on the back, I'm trying to look at my iPad where I took pictures. So we identified the problem as a lack of usage. And that could have meant declining visits, declining population, declining usage of the collection, physical materials. And then drilled down, and the key things were a loss of patrons, understanding what users want, understanding what barriers existed to using services, revisiting our mental models around what demonstrates a library's impact, so not just those transactions like circulation or checkouts, but looking at what impact we make in the community and changing the mental models that councillors and other stakeholders have in terms of that reporting structure on how we make a difference. And then some of the ways that we thought we could get at the problem were to conduct focus group surveys, do a literature review, conduct surveys with staff. Oh, one of the other problems that I forgot to mention was staff knowledge and ability to promote and champion library services. So that was a big one. And then in terms of solutions, we came up with, we used something called a dotmocracy technique to pick our top 5 or 6 items. So the stuff that has lots of dots is what we picked. And solutions, we said, were surveys to ask people what they want, host focus groups, take the library outside our walls. We thought that was a real strong demonstration in terms of increasing awareness and usership. Collecting stats, showing people what difference we make, doing things like social return on investment reports, examples like Humans of New York, getting people to share their stories of how the library has made a difference to them and made their lives change. We talked about undertaking team building and staff development exercises for staff, making sure that staff feel valued and part of the organization, and undertaking one-on-one evaluations could also be part of that. And then we also finally talked about building relationships with our stakeholders, elected officials, so mayor and councillors, and demonstrating to them how the library helps position their agenda and progress their agenda, because that's what they're interested in, what's in it for them. So positioning it that way. And then ways to implement these solutions, we talked about state-level developed evaluation tool, and that possibly could already exist. That way there could be benchmarks that could be applied across the state, and that we would use different distribution methods to communicate that survey. It could be electronic, face-to-face, focus groups over coffee, digitally. That way we're gaining as much input as we could. Having a consistent vision about why and where we're going was seen as critical in implementing these solutions. And what am I missing? Thank you. Oh yes, the pop-up libraries could be a way to bring libraries outside the wall, so delivering programs to nursery schools, high schools, and then inviting councillors in, so you're building that rapport and connecting with them and building relationships. So I think that we didn't get very far with evaluation. And I want to thank my groups. They all did a great job.
Thank you, Pilar and Colin and Pilar's various groups. Monica, where have you gone? Your turn.
Okay, well, we had 3 groups, obviously. The problem was that we had a library that was run down, the building was crumbling, too much collection, not enough space for the programs, changing demographic, and the precedent of a number of libraries being closed in various countries and in Western Australia. I don't know why that would make a difference that it was Western Australia, but anyhow, maybe it's a lifestyle choice. So, what happened was when we defined the problem was that no one knew actually what was going on. So the problem was there was actually no knowledge of anything. So we didn't know who was using it, what the community expected, what the stakeholders thought of it, what the community was. So we looked at all of those things, And then what did we do, Eva? We looked at something else. Some of the things that we talked about was that the community was unaware of what's possible with a library, and then also maybe, potentially, the library was unaware of what it could do. So there was a whole lot of new knowledge and understanding about the current situation that people were thinking would be useful to get. To do that, they did a whole lot of problem solving. How do we go about getting these things? Where did we put those? Oh, we did lots of drawings, and a lot of the drawings were about, there was one particular group. It really came down to that process of engaging people. It couldn't get clearer than that. It was engaging and finding out how to do that cleverly. So there would be different groups that you would engage with differently. The staff were really important, hold them together, bring them together with understanding of what's possible, recognising there would be some that may not want to be engaged, but at least honouring that and giving them a chance, doing different ways to engage them. Working with your potential users, your non-users at the moment, and your current users. So how do we actually bring them together, or not together, but how do we get their ideas from them about what's possible? People constantly, across all of the 3 sessions, talked about it's okay to get the information, but it's really important to feed it back. So there was a real generative sense of, let's not just do it for the purpose of doing it. I'm pretty sure I'm not doing a lot of justice to people's ideas. We had specialised libraries, some libraries that specialised in horses. So they might have, so you might design a library that's got, suited to the community that loves horses. Similar for dogs. The evaluation process, what people talked about there was, again, the solution was constantly to get more information, but not to let it just go for the sake of collecting it. So getting the solutions, going out and getting information, exposing people to what's possible, things like taking librarians and the community and perhaps building up some of the champions and visiting other libraries of a similar location or a similar size or a similar sort of problem, and to share ideas about what they're doing and look at how other people are doing things. What was interesting in our groups is we had a number of people who worked in isolation, so they worked by themselves, and a number of people obviously who worked in rural remote type regions. So we were checking in occasionally as to whether what was being talked about was relevant for them also, like where we're just actually having a discussion about big libraries. But in fact, the same problems exist. How do you connect? How do you, align your services to what people want? Solutions, lots of surveys, lots of going to shopping centres and getting people to answer what it is that they want from a library. And the evaluation, we decided, we, as in I, strongly influenced this thought, is that evaluation can potentially be very boring. So how do you make it interesting? So, mystery shopper concept, testimonials, getting partner agencies to talk about, to do the evaluation for free, so universities and things like that. Customer feedback, getting good stats on usage and changing patterns. Does that sound like a reasonable summary from the 3 groups? Anything missing? No? And Eva? What do you reckon? Anything missing? Eva did a great job collecting all the notes and keeping us on track. So thank you.
She switched me off. I'm going to give that temporarily so I have a hand free to wave at people. So our 3rd group is Annie. Annie, are you reporting or is Lynn? You might need a hand to drag that thing in. Why don't we bring that up to the front so people don't have to look through the back of their heads? Synchronised whiteboards. All right, so here's the microphone. Annie, don't run over my earring.
No, I'm giving this over to Vince now. Hello everyone, for those who I haven't met this afternoon, I'm Lynn Thompson, I'm the Senior Project Officer Social Inclusion here at State Library. we probably took a slightly different approach in what we did, Annie. Hey, it was a lot more conversation and a bit of fun and excitement. Well, we decided to take we were going to theme the council trying to cut 10% off as council or schools or whatever the power that be. We were going to choose a theme colour and a theme song. Da 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 da.
But what do you do in response to that? No, you don't go into the doom and gloom. You think pink. No, well, you do. You think that in the privacy of your own room, but thinking pink helped us imagine a different approach. And the Ride of the Valkyries was the kind of music that we'd associate with our campaign to implement whatever we had to do, but also to arrest any further cuts, and then a year later actually come back with reasons to not only reconstitute that 10%, but add more to the library budget. Now, we talked about a range of things. We had quite a far-ranging conversation, in fact. We had all of the kind of emotional and responses to being faced with that kind of scenario. People wanted to understand what the actual problem was, so seeing it from the council or whoever's perspective. We looked at things from different perspectives, just as you've heard in the previous 4 groups, and I've just realised I'm getting quite tired now, that my voice seems to be sounding like I'm just sort of on a drone. So I do want to try and liberate this a little bit more. We did understand the problem, didn't we? We talked about the themes that kind of came out of our conversations, our various conversations were around how to capture value to the value of libraries, to represent that value based on data, stories, narratives, and everything else in different ways, to be experimental with that, to involve the community in all of our decisions. No one said, let's have an insurrection. And no one said, we did experiment with what if you did nothing? Like, what if you didn't actually do it? And one person said in one of our groups, well, other parts of the council often don't do it. Why is it that we're so goody two-shoes and that we do actually do it? So we were playing around with those assumptions and with those kind of standard practices and trying to loosen them up a little bit and think differently. So I'm going to hand it over to Lynn for a few moments while I remember what else to talk about.
See, we're having far too much fun doing choosing a theme song and a colour in our conversation, Annie. I suppose that, we were just saying to empower the whole of the library staff when a situation like this is presented, that the library manager would also, they bring the whole team together, and rather than focusing on the negatives, try and put some really positive spins on it too, and come together as a group to offer solutions. And if possible, plan ahead. I know this is this sometimes doesn't happen because council or people can sort of drop things on you instantly, but if you can have that, take the first step before they come to you, be proactive rather than reactive, in all the conversation and team meetings that you have. It's a constant conversation about re-evaluating what you do, looking at what works, what doesn't, come up with sort of those positive, innovative, new solutions to present to council before they kind of come through and possibly slash.
So a bit of rehearsing is important in these sorts of things, so that when things happen, you can respond quickly, but you might respond differently. Another thing we talked about was, well, okay, we've got to make the cut, fine, okay, don't like it, so on and so forth. But what about if we cut, but we amplified, we enriched what was left? We took what was left, maybe different hours, different days and so on, and we actually ramped it up. in a really incredible way, so that by doing that we attract more users to the library. Maybe 5,000, maybe 10,000. We're getting really exciting here. And then next year when we go in and ask for a budget or whatever, I mean, to put aside all this asking business, we go in and we actually can have a lot more data to draw on. So we covered a lot of ground. I don't think it's probably worthwhile going into all the minute details, but yes, Lynn?
Just the other one thing that kept on coming back into every conversation, the power of your community itself. If there are budget cuts and things are cuts and, you know, things like opening hours and that the power of the voice, that if different services are taken away, the power of the voice of the community who really wants and needs the services that libraries provide, and hopefully councils would listen to that.
Really inspired by Pilar's video this morning, which was a really fabulous way of presenting data in a clever and ingenious way. And even though some of the libraries here probably don't have the budget, Pilar, that you would have had to produce that, we thought about there might be variations, there might be ways we could work with people to produce some clever promotional but very sound multimedia to support our library services. Oh, well, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I think,
Top class.
Don't focus on doom and gloom, proactive, reactive, power of the community, data being an important tool, not just the usage data, the anecdotal evidence and that you get from the community is extremely powerful as well. And inform. Tell the council, not everyone necessarily knows about what we do. So it's actually getting out there and telling people about what we do.
And what did you learn from today?
I work in an industry that there's a lot of very, very passionate people, and it's wonderful, yeah.
And would you like to go out on the right of the balcony? Please, another performance.
You can tell I worked a 12-hour day yesterday, so I'm a little bit delirious. Do you want me? Okay. Everyone, please feel free to join in. Ready? Da 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 da.
I haven't wanted to sing on a Monday in such a long time. Thank you, Annie and Lynn. So now we have the fourth and final group, which is Brian and Chris. Let me just get this one out of the way. Woo. Just knock me over. Who wants the microphone? Chris! Hey! There you go.
Okay. So my name's Chris Sayer. I'm Executive Manager of Regional Partnerships, if I haven't said hello to anybody yet, but I think most of you came round the circle to our group. The problem that Brian and our first group identified was we've been asked to review opening hours of our libraries to save money. What do we need to consider? So it was a nice compact problem, I think, and we worked very methodically through the 3 stages with the different groups that came to see us. So there'll be a bit of repetition. I think a lot of what we discussed was discussed in the other groups as well. But the approaches that came up from our first group, which was a very large and varied group, were survey of library use patterns, the better use of available time, so to value add to the time that you've got if your opening hours are being reduced, engage with your community, co-location of with customer services, other council services, and talk to the manager to identify the reasons why your hours are being cut. Would you like to add?
So to pick up on the preferred solutions that we looked at, because we brainstormed slightly more than this, there were 4, and they do overlap a little, but conducting a full review in the light of all the available views and evidence to match the usage hours to the usage statistics. to re-examine the potential for shared services, shared resources, shared programming to actually achieve the required budget savings by an alternative route. Maximising the staff, and I don't understand this awards business, you did explain it to me, but we'll pass on. Maximising staff and volunteering balance and the virtual presence, so in effect finding ways to, as far as possible, provide compensatory solutions for the problem. And again, as I say, slight overlap, but doing a full study of the possibility for co-locating with other council and community services. And there's an example given there of the child health clinic as just one possibility, but there would be others, on the basis that it's unlikely that it's the library service alone that's affected by the need to make budget savings. So those were the preferred solutions that we looked at, and then we finally looked at the evaluation. Do you want to round it off, Chris? Oh, we did the implementation. Yeah. Well, you can do that bit.
Okay. So our third group worked very hard, and they picked up on each of the solutions and came through with some implementation plans, and we looked at the pros and cons of those. And then we were running out of time, so instead of implementing all of this, we just focused on the shared service model, which was being implemented in one of the library services. Yeah, it's your library service, yeah, Maranoa. It's very early stages for Maranoa, so we thought, well, we'll focus on this, we'll do an evaluation of this. So the group came up, of course, with a whole lot of suggestions for evaluation, which included things that have been mentioned before, like statistics, but not just your loans and your visitors, but more in-depth statistics, community feedback, staff actively capturing that feedback, staff feedback, so council elections and what it means to the councillors within that local government, how you can reframe to match your service to the council library goals, and then really importantly was looking at your evaluation. Did you actually resolve the original problem that you were addressing? So doing that full circle through the whole process. It was fun. Yeah, it was good groups. So thanks to the groups, and thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everybody. So if we could get the 4 catalysts to the front, and I think Jane, I'd like to call on you to oversee this final session of the day, which is called the Fish Bowl. So our catalysts are the fish, and I'd like to invite everyone to bring their chairs up really close to the stage so that you can hear what they're speaking about. We are going to have microphones, but it's nice to be cosy. And if I could please ask the control box at the back, can we turn off some of these big lights overhead? They're a bit blinding when you're facing that way. Is that doable? Just maybe, dim them a little bit. How's that? We need you to be on camera, I'm afraid, so the stars have to suffer. Okay, so Jane, if you would like to take over, and I will give...
So I hope you've enjoyed the afternoon and not too tired to ask questions. And because I've got the microphone, I get to go first. So the question I had to ask, there was a lot of discussion about looking outside the library service and engaging with the community. And one of the key things for me is, what questions do you ask the community? Because for me, it's not about asking the community how they use the library, but asking the community what challenges they face, and then for the library to work out how they intersect and provide the community solutions. So what questions did you ask your communities?
I guess I need to answer the question in the context of the particular project we were addressing, which was the building of the new library. And therefore, you'll understand that we were always very careful to avoid questions which allowed people to express a view on the design of the library, on the basis that that would be both divisive and potentially quite destructive. So it was almost not so much a matter of asking questions, but certainly not closed questions, but finding open questions around what's the type of library service? What would you like from your library service if you can envision it 2, 3, 5, 10 years hence? Draw me a picture if you're 3 years old, or write me an essay if you prefer, if you're a university lecturer. But find a way to find some means to express what you want that service to do for you. What are the needs it would meet? What's the shape of the service that will best meet your needs in the years to come? So yeah, keeping the questions very, very open.
I think it depends on what you're working on in terms of what questions you would ask, because I think of our 21st century library spaces study that we did, the interns did some seating sweeps, so that means they observed what people were doing in our spaces, and they went to every single one of our branches and spent at least a week at each one recording through iPads what people were doing. And then they did a photo essay, took pictures of what people were doing. And then they did some surveying with face-to-face surveying. We did an online survey. We did a paper survey about what kinds of things do people want to do in our spaces. So again, going back to what Brian said, those open-ended questions. What things can't you do that you want to be able to do? So I'm not sure. It's such a big question. It really depends on what you're focused on. Our community librarians are sort of embedded in our communities, so I think they have the pulse of our communities. And they do organizational reviews where they ask, how can we work better together? Are we working together to meet your needs? So it's an ongoing relationship that provides information in terms of our ability to provide services that meet their needs and break down barriers. So it's a huge question. I really think it depends on what area you're concentrating on.
I'm not sure whether there's much I can add other than I think there are 2 points. One is that people sometimes only know what they know. So by asking them what they would like, they'll take it to what they already know, potentially. So I think there's also, in a way, it's an obligation to present what the possibilities might be. And I know one of the projects I worked on with the museum, people were really stuck in what they had, and it was assumed that everyone was. So we were asking the question, have you been to a museum where you had a really great experience? And what was that experience? And that was really interesting because it actually exposed the people who had no idea what was possible. And they were part of that conversation. That was staff. Yeah.
I'm just reminded of that comment that that may be apocryphal, but Henry Ford is supposed to have said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, I would have got a faster horse, not a car. So I think that sort of says it all. I'll just add something just from my own perspective, and that is that, remember I said earlier today that 95% of thought is unconscious. So often we tend to focus a lot on the cognitive, and we forget that, there are other ways that we can draw out that deeper, that less verbal kind of insight. So one way that we would do that, sometimes if we had the luxury of being in a group with people, is through visual methods. And so we use cards and photos and all of those sorts of stuff. And so it's not necessarily what people choose, it's the meaning for them in their choice. And that can be a rich source of information. I mentioned earlier today the work I did with the State Library of Victoria, but we also did a survey in that which attracted 4,000 responses. That's a high response rate. The first question in that survey, I asked, just off the top of your head, what are 3 things that come to mind when you think about your library or a library close to you? So before they had time to do all the, strongly agree and da-da-da-da. And that was the question, believe me, that produced, in my view, the richest information. just to finish that, I'll just as you asked that, Jane, I remembered one of the alumni from our Kebab leadership program that Jane was in, not your program, rang me one day. It was from a university library, and they just redone the space, and they wanted to find out what students thought about the space and, you know, what they were doing and so on. She said, "Annie, you got any ideas?" And I rattled off a few ideas, and then I said, "Why don't you ask them what music they associate with that space?" And I didn't think she'd do it. I did not think she'd do it, but she did, and it was brilliant. And then she went touring around the world telling people what a great question it was and how successful it was. But it was great because it wasn't the music. I mean, I wouldn't know what young people listen to, but it's that their choice of that what told them volumes in terms of how they were experiencing the space, how they felt about it, and what they wanted to do in it.
Moving forward, how are you guys future-proofing your libraries? So how are you looking forward and actually, I guess, trying to keep up and translate what's going on in the world through the services and space that you provide?
That's a good question. I think we have a really solid strategic plan. I think that takes us into 2018. And I think going back to what I tried to articulate this morning, that I think one of the weaknesses that our library had in the past was that we tried to do everything, and it was just one big laundry list of, we'll do this, 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 and we were so unfocused and not really doing anything well because we were all over the map. And so I think having a solid strategic plan, and I think we do have one, and I think that is sort of securing ourselves. We're already thinking about what we're going to do after 2018, so again, being sort of proactive to make sure that we're always looking at what other libraries are doing, what other institutions are doing to continue to remain relevant and testing things out. I think what Annie said is really important about expecting our users, our communities to know what services they want, because I don't think anybody in Edmonton would have said they needed a makerspace, a digital makerspace. We wouldn't have gotten that from the community. And I think it's because our staff are aware and on sort of looking at blogs, and not just library blogs, but, you know, Wired magazine and other things that can make sure that we continue to remain relevant. And I think the other key piece that I want to mention is that engagement of staff. When we do our business plan, we have frontline staff who facilitate the conversations with other staff. It's not our managers, it's not our librarians, it's our frontline library assistants. So I think that engagement and the ability for people to see themselves in the future is actually critical to sort of remaining relevant and engaging your staff.
That was really good. The microphone was nearer you, so well done. Yeah, you did. I think, yes, there's three dimensions to me, and I think Pilar's mentioned two of them very clearly. One is making sure that you're abreast of your community development and getting staff and community feedback. The second is making sure that your management, or somewhere within your function, within the library function, there's an awareness, a sort of an observatory function. You know what's going on. You're looking at best practice, so you're always trying to keep up and be ahead if you can. Both of those things are more or less within your control. The really big challenge that we have at the moment is that I think for a library service, a 3, possibly a 5, but I'd settle for a 3-year plan is about right. At the moment, it's now 5 years since we had anything better than a 1-year budget plan from the City Council. So you're trying to produce a strategic plan, a business plan, call it what you will, for a 3-year horizon with only certainty about your resource base for 12 months ahead. And that is undermining to your strategic way forward and to trying to create a sustainable service. So that is a significant challenge for us, I think.
I think it's also about making difficult decisions. And we just had a report done by our research and assessment department that shows that our circulation, we call it circulation, of paperbacks and magazines is dramatically dropping. So I think at some point we're going to have to, soon, we're going to have to make a decision about that and take a risk, because some people will be unhappy about that. So I think it also involves taking a risk, a good sort of calculated risk, but being bold and making some really hard choices sometimes that are not going to make everybody happy.
Oh, I don't do libraries, but I will comment about the strategic planning process. I think it's really important for any planning that goes ahead that it's very relevant to where you're at as an organisation. And it just came to mind when you were talking about a group I'm working with at the moment. When I first started with them, they were in complete disarray, and they had no understanding that they were. So it was just crazy to build a strategic plan for them, other than to say, you just got to get your house in order. You are really seriously in trouble here. So thinking beyond 12 months was just not going to work for them, because it would have meant they would have ignored all the problems and gone straight to, let's be fantastic and visionary. So I think any planning needs to be very realistic and reflect where you're at, and also, it sounds silly, but it also needs to be fluid, so that you're constantly looking at what's emerging here. I mean, 5 years ago, there would have been companies that would not have even understood Twitter, and now their business would be run by it. So that sense of having the ability to, I think Brian was saying, you've got to have people who've got their finger on the pulse to understand what's happening here, and bringing that into your planning and your thinking process. So that's not much specific to library, other than it's specific to your planning and your thinking.
I say running a library, and I so admire you for being leaders. Running a library is really hard. Running an organisation in uncertain times, when funding is at risk, when there's a lot of unpredictability in the environment, and also where you've got so many competitors, to use that term. It is an extremely complex and difficult thing. And you do need all the creativity and all the human resources and intelligence in your organisation and outside it. I think that's all I've got to say. I did run this might make you feel a little bit better. I did run a session recently in Canberra a couple of weeks ago with the Government Library Association. So these are the special libraries that are in government libraries, particularly the federal government sector. And if you think your life is hard, they're a really endangered species. So, because they're the first to be cut when you have, big budget cuts and budget crises and so on and so forth. So they were facing some very tough future choices about what they do. And one thing I did ask them to do is I asked them to think what was the least radical thing they could do and what was the most radical. So think about that, because it was actually yielded a very interesting conversation.
One of the things I think in terms of future-proofing is to allow your staff to play. So I think you need to invest in toys, in play, in opportunities for your staff to engage in new technology, in social media, even if they're doing it from their home accounts, but sort of really give that opportunity to engage. Some will love it, some will hate it, but I think giving your staff permission and to then share is really important. And one of the things is, yes, managing a library is hard, but if we don't maintain the joy, and every day maintain the joy, why do we come to work? So I think it is also one of the most joyful things that we can do, is to engage in public libraries, because we know that we change lives, and we've just got to work out how to make sure that the politicians and funders know that too.
Any other questions?
That leads into my question, and I wanted to ask you, Piela, do you have a training program in place for all your staff? And if so, what does that involve?
Yes, we have an in-house training program, mostly. No, it's not all in-house, but the Leading from Any position is for all staff, and that is a 3-day training program. The first 2 days are about learning some of the skills of a learning organization, the different disciplines of Peter Senge's very complex book. And then the third day is they have an opportunity to do a project. So on the third day, which is about 3 or 4 months afterwards, they come back and they share what they did with their project and how it demonstrates their learning. We do a lot of training in terms of customer service, so it's personal, a co-learning training course, customer conversation courses. We do some training on crucial conversations, and that is for supervisors and managers. I'm not sure if you're familiar with crucial conversations. It's when stakes are high and emotions are high, how to have a conversation so that you're looking at the interests. So that's been very effective in terms of different customer interactions and conflict. Those are the main early literacy training courses we do a ton of. We do a ton of digital literacy training for staff, and a lot of it is about the technology sandboxes like Jane mentioned, and just getting in there and having fun and diving in. So we have a pretty involved
So
training.
it's not a regular training program,
Yep.
it's not ongoing,
It's ongoing. Yep.
Anyone else with a question? Ooh. Follow-up question?
What are the key skills you see library workers as needing moving forward? To be able to deliver, I guess, your strategic objectives moving forward.
I keep ending up with the mic. I think we really realized the difference in terms of what skill sets library staff need when we implemented our community-led service model. And we actually dug out our job description from about 15 years before for librarians and then compared it to what we had for a couple of years ago. And there wasn't even the words customer service in the job description. So I think we need to recognize that some staff started in a library in a day that was so different and was back of house, was much more behind the scenes, that reflected a desire to be away from community, away from the public. So I think that we've really seen a huge change in terms of what skill set we need. We need people who have very strong interpersonal skills that can make cold calls, go out and contact a community and not, for the first time, have that interaction, be able to phone them up and say, hey, I'm Judy from the library and I want to get to know you, I want to understand what you do, and I can tell you a little bit about what we do, how we can help each other. So that takes a certain sort of interpersonal skill set, I think, soft skills. I think comfort with ambiguity. There's a lot of uncertainty, as Annie just mentioned, but even just in terms of being out in the community, you don't know what's going to happen, how people are going to react. So I think that being okay with sort of going with the flow and not... Yes, even if something bad happens. I think taking risks, not being afraid to make change, take some risks, to fail. I think leadership, being able to influence. When you're a staff member, you have to be able to influence, even if you're not in a position of, management. And that takes a certain sort of ability to win people over instead of coming at people with a hammer. So those are some of the things I can think of off the top. I think interest and that passion for learning, that like never wanting to stop learning, and I think is really important. And doing that on your own, reading online tools, whatever you need, talking with mentors, anything that you can do to that continuous learning. So those are some of my ideas.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I think that's exactly right. The only thing I would add, therefore, let's just re-emphasise the focus on customer service skills. I think that is absolutely crucial. So the only thing I would add is very much conditioned by the fact that the library I run, or did run, is such a very large one, and it would probably be relevant here and to one or two other large libraries. But it's about putting the right skills, the right skill sets into the right jobs. And what we've done in the past is we've really put librarians in position of becoming facilities managers, being marketing managers, being IT managers, event managers. It doesn't work. You need the right skills for the right job. So there's a difference. People tend to use the shorthand librarian for anybody who works in a library. We've got a very large number of staff who are not librarians, and they don't need those skills, but it's important they do have a good range of relevant skills to the organisation.
I think I can't add anything to what you've said, and you're the experts. You're actually running libraries and, working with staff. We're only fly-by-nighters in a sense. But one thing I would say, because we run library leadership programs, and we're about to do one with the State Library of Queensland, so if any of you are interested or know people, then there are openings there, that there are two things, and I think you hinted at that, Pilar. There are the kind of qualities like curiosity and being able to engage and, sort of reach out and have that discovery kind of mode. And then there are the kind of real practical skills. There are tools that you already have and that probably need to morph into something to meet the 21st century needs. Now, one of those skill sets is that kind of design methodology, and I don't want to scare people by using those terms, but if you unpack that, they're all the kinds of things that you're talking about in your libraries. They're about, how to look at things differently, how to be almost little mini anthropologists in your communities and, actually go and see what people are doing in your libraries and doing in their homes and trying to meet those needs. But then there are also hard's probably not the right word, but sort of structured ways of moving through, like you said, the dotocracy and these sorts of things, structured way of doing problem solving. I just will say one thing to end this though. I think sometimes the threshold for change can be a little low in some people, and I'll give an example. I've been doing a program in New South Wales with the State Library of New South Wales with public librarians or public library workers, and last year we did this thing where we did this thing called Adopt a User. We asked people to talk to one person with a set of different types of questions that they would normally ask before they came to the next workshop, and then we did all this really fancy stuff with it. But something shocked me, and that was that one or two people found that really hard. They found it really hard to switch the mode of conversation from being more transactional to being a little bit more exploratory. And I was a little bit shocked, I have to say. And so I think that there's probably something there that, about that threshold that needs to be addressed.
And one of the key things I think that is about confidence, and one of the key things that we need to be in today's world is a confident learner. So we will never be trained in every bit of technology that our customers come up to us with. But guess what? There will be a YouTube that'll tell you how to use it. So what we have to do is say, I haven't seen that before, come with me and we'll work it out together. So we have to be confident learners. We do not have to be experts. And generally, why we stay behind what we know works in terms of the conversation, in terms of how we engage with customers, is because that's where we get our confidence. So we have to be much more confident about ourselves in those uncertain times when we're not sure where the conversation is going to go. And we absolutely have to be, we are curious people. That's why we work in libraries, is because we are curious. We're curious about things, we're curious about information, and we're curious about people. But we do like to be behind that desk. We do prefer to be observers instead of being sort of part of that conversation. So that big change for library staff is you are no longer the expert. You're no longer the gatekeeper. You are the facilitator. So you're not sure where it will end because you're facilitating an outcome for the customer, not the outcome for you.
So that's the big change when you move to that customer first model and that community first model, because it's not what you think. We can no longer say, but it's good for you. You have to do it. You have to eat your vegetables like this. Because they've got, they might not want the book. They might want the YouTube video. They might not want the textbook. They might want the game that replaces the textbook. And so we've got to be much more comfortable about that instead of saying, but this one's better for you because this is the one I'm familiar with. So it's being confident, and that's why people don't want to change, is because they're not confident. And please do join the leadership program that we're offering. There are spaces, and it is about exactly the same as Pillars in that you have to do a workplace project. So it's leadership on the ground. So please put in your application. It finishes on April the 10th. So we'd love to see it closes. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something because I can. Because I have the microphone. I'll just pick up on the point from Annie and also from Pia, actually from all of you. The thing that really surprises Annie and myself when we do the course, the program, but also other work that we've done, is that people assume that they know how to collaborate. They know how to work together because you meet a lot. You meet together. And when the challenge is there to actually figure out how to work together and how to progress things together, it's actually a different step, and it's a different skill set, and it's a different level of confidence that's required. And it's a bit like Jane's comment. Some of it is just about practice makes perfect. You're never going to be perfect, but jump in there and have a go. Oh God, that was a disaster. Let's try it again. Jump in and have another go, and keep building on what you know. And keep building on what's working well. The number of times I've worked with organisations and with the library leadership groups where, people have not known how to work together as a team. And it's such a basic component of what is required in all of the work that we do. Collaboration is just vitally important. So I think if we're looking at learning and development, that's one of the things, is to learn to be able to work together and collaborate for the purpose of that, and not have a work meeting or a business meeting, because that isn't necessarily collaboration or partnership.
And exhausted our presenters as well. So thanks very much for your attendance today. Hope you have enjoyed it. Please give us some evaluation and feedback to the team. We've tried a new way of doing our forum so that we have the afternoon, sort of where you actually practice and, sort of put some of those ideas and, sort of really generate some of the actual practical skills that some of the ideas generated in the morning forums do. So I hope you enjoyed that. For those of you who are here for the small rural and regional training, and I'll no doubt see you over the coming days, so please enjoy yourself. If you are still around in Brisbane on Wednesday, we do have The Chocolate Promise by Josephine Moon being launched. She's a Brisbane writer, so if you want to come along to the Queensland Terrace and share champagne and chocolate for $20, please get a ticket, and it's Wednesday at 6:30. So please make sure you've swapped your business cards, keep your sort of interactions with people that you've met here today, start sharing ideas with each other or through the PL Connect newsletter. So we want to know what's happening in your library service and who to contact, so that you can actually share the things that work and share the things you're doing, because what you're doing will make a difference in somebody else's library service. So please just share. We just want 100 words and a photo. Thank you.